Welcome back to Foxy's Art Box. Today we'll be working on a multimedia project. Don't worry, it involves the usual resin. We'll get to that later. First is the design part. This is a piece that I have made myself, including the outline for the cute little foxes. Of course it has foxes. So the first thing that we have to do is load a piece of balsa wood, this is plywood, into the machine. This is a 3mm. One of the nice things this project can use the thinner pieces, which it's easier to find a laser cutter that is able to do this kind of thickness. Tape down the edges if you need to, if there's a little warping. And then it's as easy as pushing the button and monitoring it. With a laser cutter, one thing to be aware of is, generally speaking, you do not want to leave the room when it's functioning. And this is because things can happen. The head could get stuck. Something could get in there. I mean, it shouldn't since the lid is closed, but things happen and you are playing with fire. So it's just one of those things to be aware of. Also, make sure that you have proper eyewear if you have a laser that's not encased. These are just sorts of things that when you start playing with newer technology, we need to be very mindful. Now, don't worry. I'm not going to spend the entire time showing the full burn of this project. This is full speed at the moment, but don't worry, I will speed it up and get us through to the fun parts. Although, frankly, I have to admit, it is kind of fun and hypnotic to watch the laser cutter work. Just seeing the pieces that I have done, the outlines that I have made, being duplicated onto the wood by the tiny little firing of a laser. There's something cool about that. Yes, you know, it's duplicating a piece, but this is an outline that I made myself in Photoshop, and I think that's kind of cool. So we can have fun and watch the absolute mesmerizing pattern of a laser going to work. Oh yes, I did say I was going to speed it up, didn't I? Well, okay. Here we go. For those who are wondering, this file, with all of its individual parts and all of its individual layers, took about 20 minutes to cut out. So what you are seeing is a 20-minute process that's been significantly sped up. One of the things to keep in mind when and if you get into doing laser designs is you always want to do all of your engraving first and then have the laser come back and do the cutouts. So I'm going to have it do some cutouts here, but for the first part, it's making sure that the fox outline gets onto there and then the lettering. And once that's done, then it's going to go back through and it's going to do the internal cuts first and then coming back all the way to the external. And that way you're not dropping out pieces of wood and misaligning. That's just a tip when you get into doing designs. Laser engraving and cutting is something that I have been into for a little over a year now, getting more serious this year. I highly recommend using like a laser that already has an encased box. It does help with the smoke. Not so bad if you're doing wood pieces, but if you get into doing things like acrylics, some of the smell can get pretty bad. I haven't yet tried the acrylic cuts. That's something that I'm aiming to do in the future. One step at a time. So there it is, doing the cutout of the foxes. And yes, this is significantly faster than the machine actually runs. It'd probably break if it ran this fast. That's the actual speed. I thought I'd put a clip of that just in case anyone was wondering. This is the actual speed that it was cutting at. And every laser is slightly different, so you will run into different settings. A lot depends upon the power of the laser and how things are situated. So here is our finished pieces. And if you have a nice cut, you end up with just a little bit of toasting on the outside and nice and clean cuts. So there is the project. Now it's a matter of getting our stains on. For the foxes, I'm doing a stain of golden oak. It's just a nice light color. I will be painting this, but one of the reasons why I'm adding the stain is I have discovered that if you paint directly on bare wood, it has a tendency to, the grains will grab the paint and spread it in ways that you're not expecting it to. So it just gives me a cleaner paint job if I do it in this fashion. For the main piece that has the Cuddle Weather on writing on it, I'm using Sedona Red, especially since this is a fall piece. This is going to give it a little bit more of a color variation. I really like the pop of kind of a rusty red that it gives. It reminds me a lot of autumn leaves. One tip for when you are doing staining is to make sure that you are following the grain of the wood when you're applying the stain. It just helps for it to have a much smoother finish. And another tip is, of course, to let it go ahead and sit for a period of time, whatever the instructions tell you to, and then wipe off anything that is extra. This will just kind of help to have a more even finish and have some areas that don't end up kind of sticky. It's kind of an important step. And lastly, for the ring, we're going with a nice dark red mahogany. This gives the ring a little bit of a pop to stand out against the background and make a nice frame. This is a really thin piece in my design, so handling it with care is very important. But it goes the same steps as the rest of them, which is a roughly 15-minute sit with a stain on it and then a wipe off, just to make sure that it's nice and clean. And this is the color differentiation once it's all dried overnight. But of course, we're not done. Our foxes need color. Acrylic paints work really well. You can use craft paints, such as things like folk art. These particular ones are my regular portrait painting acrylics. I use Golden. You can really use any brand that you like. I just happen to favor these. I find that they have a very nice consistency, nice smooth layout, and good pigmentation. In the past, I've used Liquitex, which is wonderful. Definitely a little more of a bargain price compared to Golden's. So a lot depends upon your budget and how much you're going to use them. Since I use them in professional pet portrait painting, it really comes in handy to have the higher quality ones. They were a well invested piece. A good tool. And you can see that the paint is taking on into the nice strokes. It's keeping where I'm laying it down and not grabbing onto the grain and spreading it. That's the reason to do the pre-staining, just to give it a little bit of an oil seal to keep it from spreading. Now, of course, you know, we could watch the whole time that I sit here and do all the painting, but we'd be here for a little bit, and why don't we go ahead and speed this up? Couple painting tips. When working on wood, there's a benefit of it doesn't get affected by how many times you go over certain things. It's very forgiving. So one of the nice ways of doing it is to go ahead and do all of your base colors first. So do it each of your sections as a solid color, and then you can come back in later and do details, and I'll show that step in a little bit. You can start from the back and move forward in what would be the image. Otherwise, you can do light to dark colors. It's not so much of an issue with if you have the good quality paints, because they'll be opaque and they won't show through. Another benefit of using the wood burned imagery is that each of my lines is actually burned into it. So there's like a little canal in there. And if you don't go over hog wild with the paints, it doesn't go into the crack. So you still have the division. It's kind of a nice thing for novice painters. So seriously, look into something like this. If you're beginning painting, look for the wood burned images because they'll give you those nice divisions. Yes, this is still on fast. I'm fast at painting, but I'm not that fast. Now, while that looks nice, we can make it look even better by doing some detail painting. So here I am coming back in to add in some shading and to blend in some different colors. So like a fox's tail isn't a solid orange or a deeper brown, as is the case with the one tail towards the background. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding in some Payne's Gray to give it just a little bit more of definition and shading on the edges. And then I will pull the paint towards the center with a cleaner brush so that it doesn't have any extra paint added to it. Just kind of give it a little bit more. You'll be able to see that a little bit better here when I repeat it. Just kind of pull it, lay it down where you want the darkest color or the most concentrated color to be, and then pull it away and it'll kind of fade out. That's one of the ways of doing shading if you're not doing the color mixes. And when you have wood, you might as well take advantage of how durable it is. Like last time, there's no point in sitting here and watching every stroke, at least not at regular speed. So let's go. Fast forward. Notice how the little touches are starting to bring dimension. It doesn't really take a whole lot, especially on something that's supposed to look a little bit more crafty or folksy. It doesn't take much to really give it a little bit more pop and definition. And I'll take a moment to mention that this is part of the autumn Crafty YouTubers collaboration. I'm very happy to share some of my crafting knowledge and some of my, we'll just say, playing around as part of the collaboration. And I hope that others will try something along these lines and will hopefully share what their outcomes are with me. When I did the Christmas in July one, I actually was able to see a couple of people's effects, and I'm amused at how much we can inspire one another. That's what making art is all about. Last little tidbits at regular painting speed. Just a quick comparison so you can see what it's really like with me working. And not at turbo speed. So here we go. The little foxes are all set. And now make sure it looks really good up against your background. And if everything looks good, it's time to glue them together. I like to use the Gorilla Glue Super Glue rather than wood glue, and it's because it's neater in this particular case. One of the really, really nice things is there's going to be the resin step, which will definitely make sure that this is held together well. Of course, sometimes the super glue is naughty, and in that case it was. I finally got it started off camera. I do have a tendency to put pieces of parchment paper underneath messy objects, such as glues. The nice thing is that it will not stick to the parchment paper. So it's kind of a nice little trick. Utilize it as needed in your own crafting. So I just run the glue carefully along the backside, trying not to get huge globs. For this one, I'm lining the grains up so that they're running in the same direction as the underside. You don't have to. You could flip the grain if you wanted to. It's entirely up to you. I don't have to worry about durability on this particular thing because these are already plywood, and now I've added yet another layer. So I just line it up really careful, press it down, make sure that I've got full contact, and that I don't have any weird overhangs. And then we just glue our foxes in place, same method. Center, and then press down. You're going to want to let this dry overnight. Now, you could leave it just like this if you really wanted to. But I'm going to put Tumbler's Coating Epoxy over the top. This is a really nice one from the epoxy resin store. No, they have not sponsored this video. I just use their stuff. This is a really, really nice thick coating epoxy. You'll notice that there's quite a bit of bubbles in it at the moment. What I love about this formula is that those bubbles will disappear really quickly. But for the first part of this, I am making sure that I get a nice amount onto the surface and then start spreading and making sure that we get it everywhere. We'll speed this part up because this did take a little while. Lots of little nooks and crannies, and I had to make sure that I got all of the little bits and bobs. There's a lot of little fur bits. I got a little crazy when I was doing the fur part. But spread it out, coat it really nice and even all the way up on the edges. If you need a little more, pour a little more. Just use your tool to get it everywhere. And I like to run it up onto the edge on that frame piece, just to give it a nice, even coating. Once it's all coated, give it a quick spritz with 91% isopropyl alcohol. That pops the bubbles. And after it's dry overnight, I have to put the hole in. I don't do that ahead of time. And I'm sorry about the lighting here. Unfortunately, that area of my basement isn't really good. But I don't have the hole in ahead of time because all the resin would leak through. So what I'm doing now is I'm just putting in the hole for the ribbon. Then we take a properly themed ribbon, whatever works for you. In this case, it's a little narrower than my hole, and so I'm folding it in 3. Technically 6 because it's already folded in half, to get it through the hole. And then pull it through. Not all the way. All I need to do is pull it through enough that I can separate it out. And here I'm going to use a bamboo stick just to give me a little bit more of a play to get that open, because it was fighting me, and it does that every once in a while. Sometimes it doesn't like to unfold. Then we run it through when it wants to cooperate. Dang ribbon. It has a mind of its own sometimes. There we go. Now tug it evenly. And that gives that top a nice decorative finish. Then it just needs a simple knot. And this gives us our hang tab. Pull it tight, and ta-da! So the resin gives it a nice finish, and it even pops the colors a little bit more. But this is how you can make a nice decorative piece using multimedia: wood, acrylic, and of course epoxy. I hope you'll join me in crafting. And I hope you enjoyed this video and join me for the next one.